Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Identi3, a podcast all about identity and Web3. And I have the pleasure today of being joined by Delaney Millward, who is the Managing Director of Appruvr. Welcome, Del.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me today. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. More than our pleasure, Del. So Del, let's kick things off. Can you briefly introduce yourself and let our listeners know what drove you to starting Appruvr?
Yeah, so my name's Delaney Millward. I'm the founder and MD of Appruvr, which is a qualification verification solution. And what drove me to start Appruvr was I was working on a art project. This was about 13 years ago now. It was with the Liverpool Everyman Theatre in Liverpool. We were fortunate at that time to work with another organisation called Royal Deluxe. I don't know if you remember, Nick. In 2008, they brought these giant puppets to the city of Liverpool as part of the capital culture.
Right.
So we were there fortunate to be able to work on a project with them. And so as part of that, we had to recruit artists to the project. And so how we did that, we relied on recruitment agencies, LinkedIn, social media, people's own website, etc., that they'd set up. And what we found with that is that lots of these people just didn't live up to the description that we were finding on the websites and those sources. So what we quickly realised is that all these sources rely on self-reported data, and so this left open for the artists to, for want of a better term, embellish their credentials to some extent. So that started my journey really about trying to find a solution where we could find somewhere where credentials were verified. And at that time, one didn't exist. And so I started that journey then to try and find a way out how I could actually do it myself and build something up to do that. So initially I started with looking into how to do that for artists. But very, very quickly I realised that this type of solution had a much larger scope that went much beyond just artists alone.
So Del, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what Appruvr does.
Nick, what Appruvr does is it make it easy for organisations to verify credentials and enables the individual instead of the organisation to control their own credential data. And we do this through the implementation of a digital wallet. And then when either the credential has been issued from source or where the candidate has previously been verified using Appruvr, you, as the employer and the candidate, then you're able to carry out that verification instantly. And it's without the need then for any intermediaries or any physical documents. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We're starting with qualifications, but the scope for credential verification is huge, as I know you know, Nick. And so the number of use cases where this technology could be implemented is absolutely massive. So we will continue to look into how we can use that further in the future.
Oh, that sounds great, Del. And you started to touch upon some of the kind of the ways that you would go about solving these problems, but how would you encapsulate all of the kind of problems that Appruvr is solving regards credentialing and verification, Del?
The problems around credential verification and credential fraud are absolutely massive, Nick. So we've done quite a bit of research, and there's quite a bit of research already out there. You only have to put it into Google to sort of find out. But we know that 85% of individuals lie on their application in some way. And then 15% of all major alerts in candidate fraud are around academic achievements. And so both of these contribute to the financial impact of credential fraud in the UK, sitting at around 24 billion every year. And I think people don't really recognise the impact that credential fraud actually has on the UK. But also, basically, from a practical perspective, qualification verification is still generally slow and complex. It takes weeks to complete still at the moment. I think one of the industry bests is that they put out that they do it within 3.8 days. It's still too long. It shouldn't take that long. And what we found is that it still heavily relies on physical documents. And so when these are lost, this process becomes really, really complex for the individual. And so what we've found is that, especially in relation to qualification verification, is that employees are taking what they see at face value. And this then leaves the door wide open for credential fraud, because people who are looking to fraud know that that's the practice that goes on. And ultimately, you, I, anyone else who's an employer, we're not experts at being able to know the difference between a real document and a fake document, and a lot of it is guesswork. I was on a webinar the other day when they were talking about how to detect this, and the reality is, unless you're doing that day in, day out, you're not going to be able to detect the difference between a real and a fake document. But as I said, I don't want to throw statistics around because I think that's what lots of other organisations do, Nick. They put lots of these statistics out, but don't really talk about what the impact on a day-to-day basis is for people using these existing processes. So there's the whole practical issues thing that needs solving. So I seen Prince William was on the news this morning. I don't know if you've seen that. He was at Pret a Manger. So Pret have the Pret Foundation. And what that does is it helps people who are homeless at the moment get into employment. Seems like an absolutely brilliant scheme. But what that threw up in my head is that when you've got someone who's homeless, someone who may have these skills, and they want to be able to demonstrate these skills, the likelihood is if they've been homeless is that they don't have those physical possessions, they don't have those physical documents to be able to evidence those credentials that they have. And then that becomes a barrier for them to get an employment. I know Pret are supporting it, but the other employers may not be able to bypass that screening process. You've got people who've moved home from a practical perspective. You move home, everything gets put into boxes, stuff gets lost, stuff gets thrown out. When you come to look for it, it's not existent anymore. You've got young people who've came through the care system, potentially moving from pillar to post, different environments over all those years, and not able to keep those physical documents with them. That becomes an issue for them when they try to evidence them, their credentials when they're going to work. The prison system is another example. My background is working within youth justice, so we'd have young people who were coming out of custody. They complete a lot of different qualifications while they were in custody, but then documentations wouldn't come with them, and they would lose that, and then they would have to try and apply to try and get evidence of those qualifications, and that could really be problematic at times. We also spoke to some students as well who the process at the moment when you get a qualification from university is that a couple of weeks later you get your certificate of your qualification sent out in the post. This student had moved address within that period, never received their certificate, and that throws up two issues really. One is that the certificate had been sent to an address that they no longer lived in, so there's an opportunity for someone to get hold of that and misuse that certificate. But ultimately, what they had to do then is then get back in touch with the awarding body. They then had to produce evidence that they were who they said they were to be able to get another copy of their certificate. So it's a real problem. I also just pulled up some articles, Nick, as well this morning while we were waiting to come on this call about some of the issues that occur because of fake credentialing. And some of these headlines where, I mean, you've got things like a woman who faked her way to being a doctor arrested over multiple deaths. 85 fake university websites taken down in 5 years, providing fake credentials for individuals. A pilot faked CV and lied with flying experience to get a job with British Airways. Convicted fake interpreter worked on 140 court cases. Urgent checks after fake psychiatrist practiced in the NHS for 22 years. There's lots and lots of issues there. These should never have happened, Nick. They should never be allowed to happen. And I think this technology has the potential to solve all these problems.
Yeah, agreed. And it's interesting hearing you speak there, Del, as well, because there's a lot of stuff that is good to pull out of what you mentioned. I think some of those are maybe around, I guess, micro credentials. So where there's maybe not been a really long formal piece of education where you might get a diploma or a degree at the end of it. But like you were mentioning, the young people who've undergone some skills training in custody, for example, those are still skills. And so if they can be captured in some way, even in the form of kind of micro credentials that they can then store. I mean, everyone pretty much in the UK has a smartphone these days. If these can be captured and held and controlled by them in a wallet, they can be used to demonstrate that person has significant skills in a specific area. There may be a benefit down the road and obviously may benefit an employer if that person decides to turn to work. That's one point. The other point I was thinking about was the level to which fake degrees and things like that exist. We've run a couple of articles ourselves on the diploma mills that exist. I think you mentioned the 80 something odd websites that have been shut down. And these diploma mills are generating billions of dollars in revenue a year. So it's definitely a big problem. And I think because we're all trying to work at such scale today, that's why services like yours are good, because like you say, employers either don't have the 3.8 or 3.5 days that it takes to verify manually. And so sometimes they can take shortcuts because they're trying to do such a massive volume at times that it's very difficult for them to stay on top of it, which of course is great for you and Appruvr because that's a real market need that you guys help solve.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I mean, at that point you make, I think the BBC did an investigation into diploma mills a few years back now, and the scale of use within the UK alone was absolutely massive and scary, really. And if you go on the internet, within a matter of minutes, I can have a university degree. I can have a phone number where someone can phone to get a reference for me. I can have an email address where they can email to get a reference for me. It's so easy to be able to evidence, to fake a credential at this time. And I think it's unfair for employers to be able to have to be the ones responsible to try and siphon out which ones are real and which ones are fake. So there needs to be some sort of technology in there to support the employer to make sure that makes that much easier for them.
Yeah, agreed. And I think we've done a great job of explaining the kind of scale of the problem that exists. It's even frightening for me to hear you talk about it, Del, even though I know a lot of what you're saying already. It kind of makes you realize the scale of the issue that we're all facing. So this brings me on to our next question, which is, how do verifiable credentials and the technology surrounding it, how do they help solve some of the challenges that you've highlighted?
We've touched on a couple of other points already, Nick, as well, but what enables you to do, it allows you to verify the credentials from source, which you can't do currently. You have to do a long-winded approach, so you'd have to present evidence, maybe in about bills or passports or etc., to be able to get that information from source again. It's a really long-winded process, but with this technology, you're able to do that instantly. It also puts individuals in control of their own data. That's one of the biggest barriers at the moment, is that you gain a qualification and you're not able to evidence that you own that qualification, which seems absolutely bizarre to me, that you would put so much expenditure and so much time into something that you're not able to evidence yourself. It also makes that data incorruptible, and it eradicates qualification fraud by doing that. And that's a big thing, I think. But ultimately, I think one of the main points it does, it enables trust. And it enables trust in a way that's not been possible previously. So one of the examples I always use is, I don't know if you remember this, whether it was around at your time, but there was a record of achievement they used to do at school. It was like a leather-bound ballot, a bit like the "This Is Your Life" folder that they used to have. Yeah, so it was a red-bound book, and I had lots of notes in there from your teachers, and I had your record of your qualifications on paper slips that went inside it. Now that solution that the government came up with at the time, it failed miserably, and so they did a review into why it failed. Although one of the reasons was that it was a static document, and therefore you couldn't add to it, or if you did add to it, it was self-reported data, so that was always an issue. 80% of employers that they spoke to, they didn't trust the content, and therefore they didn't accept it. And so I think this technology can solve that issue.
And I think a big part of that, Dale, is of course like having that these credentials signed as well, isn't it? So that when a candidate, for example, maybe applies for a job, for example, they can present a verifiable presentation. It could be a proof of employment, or it could even be some educational attainment. And what they're presenting to the employer is a digital thing that has been signed not only by the issuer, could be the university in this case, but also by them, so that when that employer reviews that credential, they can know exactly who issued it and exactly who it was issued to and when it was issued, which I think, as you were saying, makes it extremely powerful because you can trust the source of that data. and you can basically remove all of that kind of manual verification steps that exist with kind of more hard copy or PDF type documents.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on the point before of micro-credentialing. So there's a lots of companies, lots of local governments, lots of local authorities who do lots of in-house learning, and they're really difficult to evidence. Now, if we start using this technology to evidence that, it would make the future employer really assured that the credentials that they are presenting reflect what the candidate actually has.
I agree. And the final thing I see as well is that that the part where the individual controls and kind of almost like manages their own credentials in their own wallets, that's actually a really powerful security feature as well, because today, if you have a centralized platform where all the information about individuals is held in one place, that can often be quite a tempting thing for a hacker to go and access that information so that they can sell it online on the dark web, or I don't know, do some ransom thing with the holder of the company that's supposed to be controlling that data. But if you then remove it from that centralized location and move it to everyone's individual devices, then there's no real honeypot for those hackers to go after. So that decentralized thing and the passing of ownership to the individual is empowering, but also it's a really nice security feature as well.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to think about with regards to that is that it was around anyway, but it's certainly accelerated since the pandemic, is the rise in gig and remote working, and so that approach of trying to present physical documents to an employer becomes even more incredibly difficult and risky. So if you're looking to send them through post or send them through email where they can easily be manipulated, this technology enables you to do that in a safe and secure manner and in a way that an employer can trust.
Brilliant. So next step, we've kind of moved through kind of the problems and about the generic power of verifiable credentials to help solve them. Can you tell us a little bit more specifically, Dale, about how Appruvur's solution works?
Yeah, so I'll just take you through a step-by-step way it actually works, if that's okay, Nick. So let's use you, for example. So Nick gets offered a job. Standard processes when you go for the job is that a background screening is then carried out. You provide bits and bobs of information. So what happens then is that the employer enters some basic contact details for the candidate on the Appruvr dashboard. And then the candidate then receives an email link to Appruvr. The candidate then follows the link and completes the details required for the verification. And then on completion of that verification, the outcome is shared with the employer via the employer dashboard and also via an email as well. In addition, the candidate will receive a reusable verified credential that they can add to their Appruvr wallet. In the instance where either the credential has been issued from source or where the candidate has previously been verified using Appruvr, you'll be able to carry out that verification and inform the employer instantly of that verification. So it becomes a really, really quick and instant process for them. It's very simple, very straightforward, as you see from there. Not much detail to it. And that's the whole idea, really. We want it to be as seamless and as simple for the employer to do that as possible, because previously that had been such a barrier for employers wanting to do that process. And so you can probably see by that process, we took a candidate-led approach. And the reason we did that is that the research we carried out when doing our pilots, it showed the frustration of the employers going back and forth, trying to gather the information for the existing solutions. And it became a real nightmare for them. And so we quickly realised that the person most likely to have the information about the candidate is the candidate. And so that eradicated that frustration for the employer straight away, and that process became more seamless.
Yeah, it's a good point as well, isn't it? I thought it was a really good way that you said that. The person most likely to have information about the candidate is the candidate themselves. And it's so obvious when you say it like that. But I think it's obviously then getting information from them that's you can trust, of course, and having, if they've got pre-verified information, then that's really the kind of jigsaw piece that kind of solves the puzzle, isn't it? And really enables that to run really smoothly. Perfect. And Again, more generally, Dale, like what impact do you see like verifiable credential technology and also Appruv's own approach? What impact do you see that having not only in the education sector but also within kind of workforce itself?
There's a number of different points I think that I think this touches on, but I think the first one I cited is, and I touched on it before, is enabling graduates to evidence the credentials without the need for a third party. It still baffles me that you spend best part of 60, 70, 80,000 pounds in the UK and you get a paper certificate that no one trusts. That just seems absolutely bizarre to me. And so that would solve that solution straight away and allow them to evidence it straight away. It enables job seekers to get into work instantly instead of waiting for that long-winded background screening. Ultimately, if all the credentials are verified, that candidate could share that instantly and the employer could hire them as soon as that was feasible for them to do so. We touched on it before about gig work and remote working, so it addresses the difficulty in screening candidates in that type of employment and allows them to evidence their credentials from any time, anywhere in the world. And for employers, it solves the issues around data governance as the individual holds and controls the data, which we touched on before. But ultimately, for me, it just has the potential to make the journey from education to employment a more sort of seamless and smooth transition. It's really daunting. I don't know about yourself. I remember when I finished my degree and I started looking into work, and you're trying to learn all these processes and how you approach them. It can be a real daunting time for you. And so this just makes that a bit more simpler for the candidates and allows the employer to hire much more quickly.
Yeah, agreed. You can definitely be a lot less time kind of filling out the same. It seems that you almost fill out the same information over and over and over again, doesn't it? I think that, I mean, we see verifiable credentials from as a provider, Del, we obviously see lots of different use cases. And a lot of the time it's basically how do you reuse information that's already verified and potentially for another use case? How can you reuse that in something else to short circuit that kind of frustration journey? Like, so a big one is like reusing verified data for other information. Like, how do I onboard onto this platform using information I've already provided somewhere else? And I think that's what I remember from starting out and trying to get a job. It's the amount of applications I gave the same information to over and over and over again. The monotony is fairly unpleasant. So I think, yeah, you definitely have a much more efficient user experience working with Appruvr and working with credentials generally.
Yeah, and I think what you find, you say it's the same information, but what happens is that you get lots of organisations asking for very similar information in a slightly different format, so you end up having to rewrite it again and again and again, or present it in so many different ways. And what we found when we've been looking around is that lots of people have moved to digital solutions, but they're all using their own digital solutions, which doesn't help the problem, actually makes the problem worse. So we need to find a way for that to be interoperable, and so that we can use it across various platforms in the future.
Yeah, very good. And portable as well, isn't it? I mean, it's having that portability. Yeah, fantastic. So Del, why did you choose Doc?
Oh, I mean, this is a simple one, really. So when we were doing our research into how we were going to build a solution, we met with a consultant who looked into and did a lot of research into many verifiable credential platforms. We met with lots along the way, and met with yourself numerous times, Nick. I think we had you speaking with us over and over again as we asked all our different questions. And lots, we were straight away, we thought, this doesn't feel right. We don't see this as going in the right direction. We're a bit concerned about what they're doing with regards to solution, what they're going to be doing with the data, etc. But I think ultimately, when we met with Doc and you, Nick, and Mike, etc., we felt we were on the same path. We felt we wanted to achieve the same outcomes, and we were very, very comfortable. I always related to like when you buy a new house and you go in there and you just go, do you know what, this is right for me. I felt comfortable here, and I felt very comfortable with the Doc team, and that, I say that's a lot down to to yourself and the team that you built there, because you were very responsive to everything that we wanted, and were able to answer every question, and were very transparent about everything that you were doing. So we carried out some further due diligence then, and instead we just realised that Doc was the right option to us. And say no, any inquiry, no matter how big or small it was, Doc was responsive straight away, answered us straight away, and said it was very transparent.
Oh, great. Well, and we're really glad that you chose it as well, Del. And it's, I think hats off to you guys as well, that you've taken the approach where you are actually protecting the privacy of candidates, because not everyone takes that approach. It can often be quite it can be easier to take the approach where you don't really care about candidate privacy. Those solutions already can be built much more quickly, with much less complexity. So to actually spend time working with us to build something that empowers individuals and makes them more comfortable with their data, that's a harder thing to do. But now that you've done it, hopefully it's going to pay off, and I'm sure it will, where actually people will want to use your solution because it looks after them and it makes that whole process more efficient. So we're very glad you chose us. And I think this month, Del, I think I saw, obviously we've been chatting a little bit, and I saw on your LinkedIn that the Appruvr is now officially live. I think September was the launch month. So you're working, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit more about where they can find out more information about Appruvr, and just maybe some kind of plans. What are your immediate plans for the business? Where are you what areas are you focusing on, if any?
Yeah, so you can reach us on the website, which is appruvr.co.uk, and that's Appruvr spelled APPRUVR. Nick, if you wanted to share that so people can able to see the spelling of that, so they can see the link to that'd be great. And you can follow us on our pages, which is on X, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. Or alternatively, you can just get in touch with me directly at del@appruvr.co.uk. With regards to our plans, we've just launched our direct-to-employer route, which will enable anyone who wants to carry out a qualification verification to go through that process. The dashboard is available there. You can submit that straight away. And we don't have any minimum orders. So if you want to do one verification or you want to do 100 verifications, we are able to cover any of those requests. And our next stage over the next 6 months is enabling issuing from source. So we're going to be able to enable awarding bodies, learning providers, etc., to start issuing digital and verifiable credentials from source. So yeah, that's something to watch out with in the next 6 months.
Yeah, that sounds like a busy 6 months, Del. So and we'll happily be along for the ride with you. So, but listen, the thing that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining us today, Del. Really enjoyed finding out more about Appruvr and also finding out about the impact that you guys will have on the education and workforce sectors. But thanks again.
Brilliant, Nick. Thanks very much. Great to be on the journey with you.